May all beings be happy. May all beings be healthy. May all beings be free from harm. May all beings love life. May all beings awaken. Welcome to another Cuke Audio Podcast. I'm DC Pupa of Cuke Audio and Cuke Archives, preserving the legacy of Shunryu Suzuki and those whose paths cross his. Today we are honored to have a guest of someone whose path crossed Suzuki's in a quite fortunate way. As you will hear, Suzuki started sitting in the South Bay with Tim first and some other college students in a college dorm. Then, that went on to become the Los Altos Zendo, with some moving. Now, at one point in it, you'll hear me say, right at the first, I'll say, you were in Redwood City? He says, no, we were in Palo Alto. He was a Stanford student. And I go, oh. And then later he says, that he'd put an ad and some people came. So about a dozen people responded to the ad, and among them was Marion Derby. And the Zendo, the Los Altos Zendo grew out of her living room and to her garage and then to another building. But he's not aware that before that happened, because I Googled that. I think for sure it was in Redwood City before Marion's. So I Googled it. And I didn't Google it. I searched Cuke.com with the site search box. I just wrote Redwood City in quotation marks. And, I guess, now I haven't looked into it further and talked to him, but I just saw in the Haiku Zendo Chronicles, one of the people there, a woman said that for a few months they met in her home in Redwood City. So I guess, but they clearly, when they had a dozen people, they didn't want to be downstairs in a college. It wasn't a dorm, it was a house with college students living in it. But, most of them weren't sitting. It was just Tim's trip. And so some people came and sat in the living room. So this woman offered her house. It was in Redwood City. And I assume that there was no intermediary house between there and Marion's, that after a few months in Redwood City, it moved to Marion's. And I'm sure if I look more closely at the history in the Haiku Zendo Chronicles, it'll say that. But anyway, Tim has a unique history. He's a unique person. And he went on to, through a winding path, become the abbot of the Minneapolis Zen Center, which was founded by Dainin Katagiri, who was Shunryu Suzuki's assistant priest at Sokoji. Tim has published 2 books, Nothing Holy About It and Zen in the Age of Anxiety. Nothing Holy About It, the subtitle is The Zen of Being Just Who You Are, and the Zen in the Age of Anxiety, Wisdom for Navigating Our Modern Lives. And he has a 3rd book that he has to give the final to Shambhala this month, I think on the 15th. So, and then we talk in here about a 4th book, and they had a great idea for a 4th book. So after our pause to meditate, let's give Tim a call. Oh, one thing you'll notice, when I say let's give him a call, of course that's we've already talked, right? But I like to do it that way, sort of pretending. So you'll notice we're not saying he's not answering the phone, and we're not saying hello and all that. That's because when I called him, I don't think he's used to doing this. His phone just went straight to answering machine, or maybe not machine, went straight to voicemail. And so I did it a few times, and I was sending him some emails. And then I looked at my phone book in my computer, and I got another number for him, a home number. So I called, and his wife answered, and then, when I got through to him, we had some audio problems, and the other phone was still on. So we start at a certain point there. And so now you understand that. So we will, give him a call just as soon as we've had our pause to meditate. So when you hear the bell, hit pause if you're of such a mind, and meditate or whatever for as long as you want. When you're ready to come back, hit unpause. And we'll be here to hit the bell and end the meditation or whatever, and we'll get straight into Tim Burkett.
Yeah, you've been in Bali quite a few years, huh?
Yeah, about 8.5 years.
Wow.
That's true. And how long have you been in Minneapolis?
Well, Linda and I moved in the neighborhood around where Zen Center is in 1975 when Zen Center was buying this building. And Linda said to me, I am tired of moving. I want to stay here for a while.
Well,
1975.
you've done that.
Yeah.
So Tim, what are you up to these days?
Well, I'm no longer the guiding teacher at Zen Center, but I still teach there a lot and mentor a lot of people. And you may remember I'm finishing my third book. Shambhala wants it by April 15. And I'm turning 79. So I don't know how much more time I have to do this stuff, but I'm still into it. I still love it.
Yeah, that's great. What was your first book?
Nothing Holy About It.
That's right.
That's the one you read carefully. And the second one was Then in the Age of Anxiety. I'm not sure. Probably sent that to you too. But the first one you read carefully, and you made some important corrections in regard to my memories.
And people do that to me too. Yes, we have to help each other. I see. I just got a link from J.J. Wilson. You remember her, Philip Wilson's wife?
Oh yeah, I remember J.J. Yeah, I remember her.
Yeah, she just sent me a link to your New Directions. I guess it was an interview, or you were on New Directions Radio?
I don't know. Yeah, I've done different interviews over the years. I don't know who New Directions is, but that's fine. I haven't done anything recently.
I didn't look at the date, but I've got it put on your page on Q.com. Huh?
Oh, yeah, but Phil's been dead for a few years, hasn't he?
Who?
Phil Wilson? Phil
He's
Wilson.
been dead. I don't know. He died 10, 15 years ago. Or I don't.
Yeah,
I don't
yeah. You know,
quite remember.
yeah, I knew him pretty well. I knew him pretty well. He was at Stanford before me. He was a football player there.
Oh yeah.
And yeah, I knew him pretty well. I never knew JJ well, but I knew Phil
Huh.
quite well.
Did you know him at Stanford?
No,
Yeah,
after
you knew him
Stanford.
at Zen Center. Well, let's
Yeah.
go back. When did you, when did you first get an inkling that you were interested in understanding things a little differently than you had before?
Well, I was at Stanford and I took a course in abnormal psychology in probably early '64 or late '63 from a guy who became a famous psychologist. And
What's his name?
let's see, Walter Mischel,
Mm-hmm.
Mischel or Michel. He went from Stanford to Harvard. He became quite famous. Anyway, it was an abnormal psych, and he gave us options for term papers, and I chose the psychedelic experience. I had never taken acid. This is '64, but I chose it. It sounded fascinating to me. And from there, from reading in that paper, as I was researching it, I kept coming across all this mystical literature, specifically Zen Buddhism, and that just whetted my appetite for going down a path. And I wasn't even interested in the chemicals so much. I thought, geez, if these people can do it on their own, I should be able to do it on my own too. I was a little bit maybe naive or just audacious or something. So that's 1964, early '64. And you come in about '67.
66.
I don't remember.
66.
Oh, you come '66.
So
Yeah, 2 years later.
So you got that notion in '64. So what did that lead to?
Well, it led to not going to my class as much at Stanford, but getting just fixated on this mystical, non-dualistic literature and reading one book, The Teachings of the Mystics, over and over again by Walter T. Stace, and not knowing how to meditate, but meditating without knowing it by reading these passages over and over again and coming back to them over and over. And then I had this full-blown experience where Tim dropped away completely, and there was just, for about 3 days, just joy and sense of connection with the whole world, all of life. So that was my entree. And then I was on my way back to Stanford on the train. This happened during spring break in '64. It started fading into a memory. And by the time I was back to Stanford, it was a memory, and I was, a shitty, worried about how I was doing academically and stuff like that. But I after that, I just said, this is what I'm going to do with the rest of my life. I'm going to find a meditation teacher. And I thought a Zen teacher, because by then I was reading Alan Watts and D.T. Suzuki.
Mm-hmm. So what happened next?
So then I went up to San Francisco from Palo Alto and went to Chinatown because I thought Zen, China, and I looked in the phone book in Chinatown under Z. I mean, I was naive, right? Zen, Chan, I didn't know what Chan was. So, but I looked under Z, and I found the Zen Bar and the Zen Center. And I thought, well, that's interesting. And I already was a pretty good drinker. I didn't think I needed to do the Zen bar. I was too good a drinker. So I just went over to Bush Street, and I can't remember if they had a doorbell at Suzuki or I knocked on the door, and this little elfin man came down and answered it. And that was Suzuki, and that's the beginning. He answered it, invited me in, and was friendly to me. And I told him about my experience. I thought he would, totally endorse me and my experience. And then he said, "That's good, but that's not Zen," which was kind of annoying. And then he showed me to, I think what I remember is took me into the Zendo, and showed me to sit on a cushion, and said if I wanted to fully get what Zen was and get it in me, I should come sit with him every morning. And by that time I should sit every morning. So then I began commuting from Palo Alto to San Francisco to sit almost every day.
At what time?
Oh, well, I would go up at night. I was a night owl. So I would go up at night and then drink coffee in cafes until 5 a.m. because that was easier for me than to have to switch my whole schedule around and then go to Zazen.
Wow.
That was how I started. Yeah, that's how I started.
Huh.
And back in those days, as you well know, there weren't that many of us. There weren't that many of us. I met Silas fairly early. I met Mel fairly early. Mel told me he was a taxi driver. Who else? I met Phil, of course. Phil was very, very charitable. I met the Shirley and Betty Wong. They were very friendly. They invited me over to Tolan's, who later was the founder of the 10,000 Buddhas, and I would go there once a week. I went to once I moved to San Francisco. I dropped out of Stanford. I would move between. They were only 2 blocks apart between Suzuki and Tolan's place. And, Tolan became almost as famous as Suzuki did, only then there were just 3 or 4 of us. At Suzuki's place, there were 15, 20 of us.
Mm-hmm.
Tolan became founder of the city of 10,000 Buddhas.
Yeah.
And it must have, some wealthy Chinese must have, because when I knew him, he was just in his little cramped apartment.
Mm. Mm. I remember Tim Buckley used to sit with him. I think Tim rented a room from him. I think he owned that building.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, so you remember Tolan?
I did not sit with Tolan. I knew about him, and he had a temple down in Chinatown. I can't remember what it was called. I think it was called the Chan and.
Oh yeah, but in maybe by '66 he did, but in '65, Shirley and Betty were the ones who helped him out. They cooked for him. They translated, and they said to me, "Well, Tolan doesn't go to Chinatown much because he only speaks Mandarin, and they speak Cantonese, and he feels really lonely."
Maybe that wasn't his temple, and I just always assumed it. Oh, that's really interesting. I don't know what happened to those 2 girls, but I never met them.
Oh, they're still around. When I gave a book reading at after Nothing Holy came out at San Francisco Zen Center, and Shirley came to my reading.
Oh my gosh!
Yeah. I hadn't seen her, for 40 or 50 years, but she came to my reading.
Wow, I'd love to get hold of her.
Oh, I have her email address.
Oh, wow.
I could do that.
Yeah, hey.
Yeah. It's a little outdated, but I think I don't know. I'm not sure, but I think Phil and she may have had an affair. Phil was kind of.
That's right.
JJ was.
I remember that.
No.
I think Suzuki was sort of pissed about it or something. I can't remember.
He was really pissed at Phil. Phil was someone he was very fond of, his protege, and then Phil just misbehaved.
Boy, ain't that true.
Yeah. Oh, you came in '66, not that much later.
Oh, no. You were, look, all right, about what, you were 64, about what time, what month?
That would have been April.
All right, so April.
Something like April.
I was 2.5 years later because I came in the fall of '66 or in the late summer. So that's Shirley and Betty Wong, right?
Yeah.
They were gone by the time I came, but I've sure heard about them, especially from Phil.
I don't know. I don't know how and why they drifted away. I don't know.
Well, people did.
Yeah, right. Well, even me.
Yeah,
even me. But
all right. So you're sitting in this city, and then what happened?
Well, then so that's April of '64, roughly, and then September of '64, Suzuki says to me, remember, it's really small Zen group, so I kind of know him. I mean, in a way.
Yeah.
I mean, not intimately. I kind of know him, and he says to me, I'd like to start a group in Palo Alto. Would you set it up? And I said, oh, sure, I'd be honored. So he said, I'll come down the night before. We'll do it once a week, and I'll sleep on the couch if you can find a place for me. So I found a place at some graduate student's house at Stanford where I was going to school.
Wasn't it in Redwood City first?
No, it was in Palo Alto first. Yeah. No, not Redwood City, Palo Alto. Mm-hmm. That was '64.
Describe the place and tell about when he first came.
Oh, describe the place? Well, it was graduate students rented this house. Maybe they were undergraduate students. Stanford students rented this house. They were asleep upstairs when we started. We'd start at the usual time. Phil or someone would bring him down from the city, and we started at 5:50, the usual time, and then afterwards, and hardly anybody was there, maybe 3 or 4 of us, but he didn't seem to mind. Then something like 6 months into it, I decided I'm going to put a little announcement in the Palo Alto Times, my home paper, about the group. And so I put an announcement in, and then the next week, I think 12 people show up, including Marion Derby and Tony Johansson, and they this is the first exposure they'd had to meeting with a Zen teacher, and the rest is kind of history.
Yeah. Now, when Suzuki first came to sit with you, what happened?
What do you mean? Well, we just give us a little sitting instruction, and after that, we just sit. We do I don't remember doing Kinhin, actually. I don't think we did. We just did Zazen, and then...
where did you... what did you use for cushions?
I don't even remember. He didn't bring Zafus down with him, I don't think. I didn't own Zafus.
Did he come the night before?
No, he didn't come.
That never happened that way.
Phil Wills.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, Phil or someone brought him down the morning of.
Yeah.
And they'd leave San Francisco at 4:30 or something.
Right. Now, as I recall you telling me years ago, the first thing he did was say, "You got to clean this."
Oh yeah, then there's another. That's the story about. He started cleaning himself after we did the zazen, and he gave us a little talk. He would clean, and then we just felt, God, we got to do this. We got to clean with him. So we didn't say anything for 2 or 3 weeks, and then finally I said to him, "Sensei, we're students at Stanford," which, I thought he would think was a big deal, I guess. I don't know. And I said, we got to go to class. He said, "Oh, yes, we start earlier." So I said, "Oh, okay, we don't have to start earlier." And I talked these other 2 or 3 people into staying and cleaning with him.
Huh.
So we did. We cleaned. We cleaned. And meanwhile, the Stanford students upstairs just slept through the whole thing.
Huh. Now, you said we're students at Stanford.
Yeah.
Were you still a student?
Well, I don't know who the other. Yeah, I was still at Stanford.
But you mentioned earlier that you dropped out of school and were just.
I dropped out in spring of '65 and moved to San Francisco. And I lived right across the street from Suzuki in in an apartment building owned by the Japanese congregation. But this is September of October '64.
Oh, I see. Okay. Now I want to go back. To Marion Derby and Tony Johansson showing up.
Yeah.
You said the rest is history.
Yeah.
What is that history?
Well, the Johanssons became pretty close disciples of him and moved to San Francisco themselves. And the story of Marion became, a really kind of close in the early years disciple of him and recorded all those talks. Oh, so after I moved to San Francisco from Palo Alto in spring of '65, I've had that Palo Alto group going for 6 months. Marion says to me, "Well, these students," she said, "I don't know them, but I have a garage, and I'm going to move everything. I'm going to move the whole thing to my garage in Los Altos." So she does, and they convert the garage. A bunch of people come work on it. I'm in San Francisco then, but I'm in touch with Marion.
Yeah.
And so she does that. So the Palo Alto group becomes the Los Altos group. She lives in Los Altos.
They started sitting in her living room, and the.
Oh yeah, maybe.
Yeah, the garage was converted in '66 in the summer. When you moved to the city, then you weren't involved with the Los Altos Zendo anymore.
No.
All right.
Not until I went back to Stanford. But when I went back to Stanford, I commuted from Palo Alto to Los Altos every day from, let's see, when did I go back to Stanford? Fall of '66, and I graduated in June of '67. So I was there every day, but I missed, I guess, a year while I was living in San Francisco.
Oh, I see.
Like
I
that.
see. All right.
Yeah.
I got it now. All right.
Yeah.
So there you are in San Francisco. You'd moved there, and people are sitting with Marion. So how'd that go?
Well, it went well for me. I lived right across the street from Suzuki. I didn't have to commute for zazen. I just got up and ran across the street, and I heard the Palo Alto group had moved to Los Altos, and it was going well, and Sensei said it was going well, and that just seemed all cool to me.
Yeah. There's a story you've told about very early on, while Suzuki was still, I believe, coming down to Palo Alto, where you were telling him you wanted him to explain the Heart Sutra that you were chanting. Do you remember that?
Yeah, and you put that. I do, and you put that in the book Zen Is Now, and I appreciate that. It's a longer story than you put in the book. So a couple of my friends from Stanford, 2 or 3 of my friends want to come up to the city center, and I bring them up. They've read Alan Watts and D.T. Suzuki. That's what people had read back then.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm sure you remember that.
Oh, yeah.
That's what we'd read. And they, they're interested in Zazen. They like doing the Zazen. They like meeting this charming man. They say he was charming. I think, they think he's charming. By then, I knew him pretty well, and I didn't know he was charming anymore. You know what I mean?
That's great.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and they said, yeah, but what's the deal in this Heart Sutra? They said, this is crazy. This doesn't make sense. And you guys did all those full-length bows, and we did them too. So they never came back. And so then I started asking him, and my memory's not very good about this, but to explain the Heart Sutra to me, and basically he never refused. He just had something else to do. Probably 3 or 4 times he had something else to do, and I finally gave up.
Right. All right. I remember how you told it. You said he'd say, okay, I'll do that, but first let's do the dishes. And then you did the dishes with him, and then he'd go off.
Yeah, that's right. Well, he was like that, He was really idiosyncratic, and these days, I don't know. People aren't so patient these days. There's so many Buddhist teachers around, but then well, you remember that. Idiosyncrasies didn't get us. We liked them.
Yeah.
You remember that, don't you?
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, then I have many years later, I have reflected on this for all these years, and I think there were 2 reasons he didn't, 2 possible reasons he didn't explain it to me. One was that he wanted me to get the resonance of it in me. That it's a meditation, ancient meditation tool, and we did it in Sino-Japanese, and he just wanted me to get it and get out of my head and get it in me. The other one is that I don't know how I could have explained it to me. I mean, the Heart Sutra is, what it does is it takes 400 years of Buddhist catechism and negates it all. Well, if you haven't been trained in the Buddhist catechism, then what's going on here? So I don't know how he could have explained it to me. I didn't really come to pick it apart and understand it, either from Suzuki or Katagiri. I did it when I went to Naropa in 79. And Naropa, the Tibetan Buddhists did a better job than the Zen teachers of kind of unpacking this stuff for us intellectually. I don't know why, but I finally thought, yeah, there's the whole history of Buddhism in there, and what they're doing is negating that. Is what they, and then I saw. So when I teach the Heart Sutra, I'm always a little bit. I actually said to Ben Connolly the other day, who's my former student and now one of the main teachers at Zen Center, people are still really puzzled by the Heart Sutra. We should probably have a class in which we teach all the background stuff. And then I said to someone today, well, what we need to do is get all of our belief systems, whatever we believe, mine and yours and someone else's, and then develop the 21st century Heart Sutra where we negate it all.
That's great. That is great. There's that tradition in Christianity, too.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Yeah.
Via negativa.
And it's resonant, I think.
Yeah, that's a really great idea, Tim. I'm going to remember that.
Wow.
Well,
maybe I can talk Shambhala into making that my 4th book.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. Hey, so you were practicing there in the city, and then when did you start to hear? When you first remember hearing about wanting a place, or did you hear any of the talk about wanting a place in the somewhere outside of the city to practice? more intensely?
Well, since I used to talk about that sometime, but not much. And then all of a sudden, this guy came along who never came to Zazen with us, named Dick Baker. And there he was in the center, and he'd found this place. And Suzuki sounded, really, really interested and really into it. And then Dick Baker, I know Dick had been an early student of his, but Dick never came to Zazen with us. I was there every morning and every night. He was never around. He was too busy doing other things.
Yeah, he was doing conferences for UC Berkeley.
Yeah. So that's when I started hearing about Tassajara, and I went down early on some trip down early on before we decided to purchase it. And I remember Dick running through the woods, showing me different things. I could barely keep up with him, showing me this and that, and the other, and then moving on to showing it to someone else. He was an interesting guy. Interesting.
You were in on the walk, maybe where I don't know, about 15, 20 people went there and walked on the horse pasture. And and did you get into Tassajara itself? I'm sure you did. But
yeah, we were there at the bottom.
Yeah.
We were at I thought it was great.
Yeah.
I mean, from the moment I saw it, just driving down. Wow, just driving down those hills.
Yeah, oh my God.
And then finding that oasis at the bottom, my goodness.
Do you remember that the first fundraiser, which I was involved with, was not for Tassajara, it was to buy the horse pasture land?
Oh, I forgot. Well, what was the Zenefit for? The San Francisco Zenefit with Janis Joplin.
That was for? God. I'd have to look at the date. That might have been for Tassajara. There was the fall fundraising to get this land to build a monastery that was the horse pasture, which was land owned by the Becks. They had 360-acre parcels, right? The Tassajara, the horse pasture, and the Pines, all near each other, but not connected. And so that was 20,000, I think, or 21,000. So when Dick went to do the deal with Bob, they started talking about. I think what happened was Bob and Anna really wanted the Zen Center to have it, and came way down in their price for Tassajara. The way I'd heard it back then was Tassajara wasn't available. They weren't ready to sell it, and all of a sudden they were. But Anna says, no, we were. They'd been. I know because I know a lot about them now. They'd been trying to sell it. So they came down in price to $300,000, I think. So Dick came back to the board and got permission to put the $20,000 on as a down payment for Tassajara, with a $45,000 payment due in 3 months.
Oh, wow! I don't remember that. That was dicey.
Yeah,
that was quite a risk.
No kidding.
Wow.
No kidding. And listen, Suzuki was worried. Everybody was worried because.
When would that have been?
Well, that was.
What month would that have been?
The deal to buy Tassajara, the final actual deal, was done in very late December 1966. So we had Tassajara then.
Oh yeah. Well, I was living there in San Francisco then. Yeah. I'd moved away from the apartment building across the street from Zen Center, and I was living 3 blocks away with my girlfriend, Linda.
Oh, wow.
I met my girlfriend Linda at Zen Center in, let's see, spring of '65. Yeah, I met Linda in spring of '65. I was a TA from Berkeley. I mean, there was a teacher from, I guess he was a T. Linda had a TA. Linda
Teacher's
was
assistant.
Yeah, at Berkeley, his name was Gardner Rusk, R-U-S-K. And he had a little dinner party in Berkeley in something like May of '65. And Linda had been over to Zen Center a few times on those Wednesday night things, and I thought she was attractive. And so Gardner, who was her TA in Bach and Handel, she was taking a course in Bach and Handel.
Wow.
Gardner had a little party in Berkeley, a little dinner party, and he invited me and her and Sensei and maybe Sheridan Erickson and 6 or 8 other people. And that's when I first developed my friendship with Linda, which turned into a romantic one. And that's also the evening, which you've written about, I'm sure. I don't know if it's in my first book, when Linda and I are sitting in the back after the dinner at Gardner Rusk's. We go to see this Korean Buddhist speak in Berkeley, and Sensei's toward the front, we're toward the back, and this guy is just cracking me and Linda up because he's a literalist about reincarnation. He's reading from some text about how if in this life you steal from the offering box, in the next life you'll be born without a hand, and that's the whole talk. And Linda and I are just, we're just teasing and playing. I thought we were being quiet, but I guess we weren't, because the next morning at Zazen in San Francisco, Linda and I and Sheridan are all there, and he comes around and hits us all. He hits us hard, and then he says something like, respect people, good Zen students. Respect, very important. And he goes, whop, 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 whop. You know how he used to do, whop, 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 whop.
Yeah. Well,
and of course, only Linda and I and Sheridan know what he's whapping about. The other people are just, what's going on here? But he whaps everybody.
Oh, I don't know that. I've never heard this story. That's great. Now.
Oh yeah. We all get hit. Yeah, we all get hit. Maybe I left it out of my book.
Where was the talk the night before?
Somewhere in Berkeley.
And you say Suzuki was there?
Oh yeah. He was there.
That's very unusual.
We were at Gardner Rusk's dinner. He was at Gardner Rusk's dinner.
Oh.
And someone must have brought him over. Gardner Rusk had this dinner for about 6 or 8 of us, including him.
Was Eileen Horowitz there?
I don't know who Eileen Horowitz is.
She was trying to get him to meet some Korean teacher. But that's so unusual for him to go to a talk some other teacher is giving, that he must have just been. And also, this is very unusual for him to go over there and go to this dinner like that. It's early years before he got so busy with all the students and Zen Center getting bigger.
Right.
But
yeah, and Oksan hadn't come over.
No. She came in '62.
She did?
Yeah.
Are you sure? Are you sure?
Yes.
Oh. Well, then why wasn't she invited to the dinner? Okay.
Well, she just didn't come.
Okay.
She didn't necessarily want to go out and have dinner. You know, she was just hanging out all the time. She with Japanese people in our Japanese Americans that she felt comfortable with, and of course she knew and was comfortable with the Zen students. But then going out somewhere to some dinner in Berkeley. So Suzuki must have been just brought to the dinner and then brought to the talk. Just not something he would have wanted to do.
Of course. Yeah. So I don't remember any of those details, but I sure remember him hitting us, and so does Linda, and so does Sheridan. I don't know if you ever knew her. She lives in Berkeley, Sheridan. She was at Tassajara when you were.
Yeah.
She was Tim Buckley's girlfriend for a while.
I forgot about that.
For a while.
Yeah, well, I remember her, and I've got some stuff from her. You know, one thing that's interesting about that story to me is that this literal sort of understanding of reincarnation, which is not at all Suzuki's, that you know, he wouldn't, that wasn't the way he saw things at all, but that he thought you should have been respectful to the speaker no matter what they were saying. Yeah.
And of course, later I learned that that's part of Japanese culture. You always respect your elder, especially in the Buddhist tradition.
Yeah.
And of course, Linda and I didn't think anybody even noticed, but we must have. Well, we were kind of flirting with each other, probably.
Oh, that's funny. That's funny. That's funny. I'd say in Asia, elders are respected. They are here in Indonesia.
Yeah.
And parents. Well, somebody was asked recently, just a very general question, what's the biggest difference between Asians and the West? And there were several things, and they were really focusing on America, but, you know, Asians in America. And the first one was the respect for parents and elders, which is not a given in the West necessarily. It's absolute here. You don't.
Yeah, and that's very Confucian. And, you know, Confucius, 4th century before the contemporary era, has a huge effect on the Chinese and the Japanese. Huge effect. And here's another story which probably hasn't made it into anything. I don't know. Maybe it has. So speaking of elders, in spring of '65, after I'd been going to Zen Center for a year, I dropped out of Stanford and moved to this rental property across from Sakoji. And I tell Suzuki that I'm doing this, and he says, he seems a little concerned, but then later he warms up to it, and he says, well, what about your father? And I don't know if I've talked to him about my father. I can't remember.
Wait a minute. He concerned about your doing what?
Leaving Stanford, dropping out of Stanford, giving up my education and moving up to Zen Center. He says, what about your father? What does your father do?
Oh, yeah.
And I said, my father is very materialistic. And he looked at me and he said, material is good.
Oh, that is good.
That's all he said. Material is good. I don't know if that made it into anything. Maybe not.
No, I've never heard that. That was good.
Yeah. And lots of the things he says to me, I question. I think, well, he just didn't understand my English. But in retrospect, I think every time he did understand my English, I just chose to not. I chose to interpret it that way because I didn't want to hear it.
But so, what about your parents and their how they related to what
my father and my mother separately, they actually ended up separating. So I got married to Linda in spring of '66. I've been coming to Zen Center for 2 years regularly, and living up there too. And we have a small wedding, and we're going to have it at Zen Center. And Suzuki says he'd be glad to do it, but my father says he won't come. And if he tells my mother that if she comes, he's going to divorce her, because he's afraid that he's a big time attorney in San Francisco, that his friends will read about it in the newspaper. That's what my mother says anyway. So we get married at the Unitarian Church in Palo Alto, and I invite Suzuki to come.
By whom?
By my childhood Unitarian minister, Dan Lyon, and we write our own little ceremony and ask Suzuki to come, and he at the end says no, he can't come, but he will send his assistant Katagiri, Dainin Katagiri, and Tomoe has just come over fairly recently, so they both come down to Palo Alto for my wedding. And she has never cut her hair. She has it in a big bun, and she wears this beautiful kimono. And Linda just has a very simple kind of Unitarian Quaker-like dress that she makes. So everybody looks at Tomoe, and nobody even notices Linda. I mean, that's my memory.
Oh, that's great.
But Tomoe doesn't speak any English, but she's very attractive. Well, both of them are very attractive, actually. Yeah. So a lot of these, you see, there's a lot of stuff that is still in my memory, and as we get older, how our memories of more recent things fade. So we still remember these things that were they formed the foundation for my adult life.
Yeah.
These experiences. Yeah. Probably the same for you, huh, David?
Somewhat, yeah. Recent memory. Well, I'd say to my wife, she says, but I told you so-and-so. And I'd say, oh, well, that happened in the recent past. So I don't remember the recent past. So the two of you got married in the Unitarian Church out of respect for your parents. A lot of people wouldn't have done that.
Oh, yeah. And I'll tell you more about this, my own family history. So then my grandmother, who's my father's mother, gives me some money, and I give it to Zen Center for Tassajara. And my father gets a wind bell at home in Atherton, and it lists me as maybe a major donor. I don't know. I don't know how. It seemed like a lot of money at the time, but I don't know how much it was. And my father is just livid when he sees this, livid. And he says he's going to disinherit me because, if I'm going to throw away money like that, he's not going to give it to me. And so he does disinherit me, actually. And then I worked for years to kind of mend the relationship and get back into his good graces. I quit mentioning Buddhism and meditation because it irritates him so much. And then I become executor of his estate. And we have I'm not saying we have a wonderful reconciliation because he's a pretty distant man, but we have a pretty good reconciliation. So I work hard on that. That's my upaya for years, to try to get my father back.
Oh, that's really touching. Yeah. Well, you're a good son. You're a good son. A lot of people wouldn't have done that, wouldn't have extended themselves the way you did. Very good.
Yeah. Well, I did that, and of course I didn't, even though I just still thought Suzuki's comment about material was good was off the wall. I did this for myself. Now, in retrospect, I'm not sure what he meant by that comment.
Well,
I mean, I know that he came from.
Yeah. That's typical Zen teaching, there's two sides.
Yeah,
And if somebody's attached to one side, you go to the other one.
Yeah, yeah, that's right. That's right. And that reminds me of another story, which may be in my first book. So one day I was walking down the street on Bush Street, and I run into him coming from a market. And he shows me the vegetables in in his bag and says, "Look." And I look, and they look really attractive. And he says, "Only 2 days old," or something. Only 3 days, I don't know. And immediately my initial beginner's mind goes, "Yuck," And then he invites me over for soup, and I say, "No, thank you," and I run and I rush off. So what he comes from, what kind of poverty he comes from in post-World War II Japan. So material is good.
Yeah.
Material is good.
Well, he was born in his father was the priest of a small temple, and his father would pick up old vegetables from the road that had fallen off of a cart and cook them. But wouldn't waste anything. He would say everything has Buddha nature.
Oh, yeah.
And they were very poor.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And during and after the war, it's true, there was a definite shortage of food. I mean, they were scouring the woods for food.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So, look, did you have anything on your mind then? I'm ready to ask you something else.
No.
All right. So,
sure.
So we get Tassajara going, and I remember you in the first practice period. I don't remember when you came down. I had been living there. I was one of the earliest people to go live there.
Yeah, I remember.
But you were.
Yeah, we came down. Linda and I came down just before practice period started. That must have been June.
Right.
I graduated from Stanford, and then we came down.
Right.
There, yeah.
So, how did that work out?
Great. I just loved it. I loved the practice. It was hard, as you remember, but I was really up for the challenge. It was wonderful. And you may or may not remember, I kept to myself. I didn't talk. I really thought, wow, this is a chance. So it was wonderful, pivotal experience for me in my life. I lived there. I stayed those 2 months, and then I went back to San Francisco and then came back for a month. So I did unlike you lived there. I was probably 3 months total, but pivotal.
Oh, yeah.
Pivotal months
well,
in my life.
I remember you at the first session. What do you remember about that?
Oh, well, I had this. What I remember is, this is what I remember. I don't know if this is written down somewhere. I'm sure it is. So I was having a really hard time during the session, but my hard time was just because my aspiration was so strong and deep, and my mind just kept tooling all over the place. And I remember I was perspiring, and there was sweat was, all through my shirt. And I remember Suzuki saying to me, "You've been in the river and you need to go change your shirt." So I went and changed my shirt. And then I came to Doksa, and I was still having a really hard time. I don't know if it was the fourth or fifth day, who knows. But I was having a hard time because I was intent on just focusing. And anytime Tim came in, I would just focus more, and I would sweat more. And then he said, "Oh, you're having a really hard time. Why don't you repeat this mantra?" And then he gave me the Gate mantra to do. And I never even heard him talk about mantras before. So then I came back and I repeated that, and I did that, and I did that. And I had a huge enlightenment experience and ran out into the woods because I didn't want to bother people. Then that night, I had a dream, and he told me in the dream, Suzuki was there, not to share this with anyone, but it was too
Oh, boy,
late.
was it?
I'd already, yeah.
Well, you hadn't been sharing it verbally. You hadn't been going to people saying, hey, I just had an
No,
enlightenment experience.
right.
But you were,
Right.
I mean, I remember you were, I don't remember what. It was like you were dancing around or, after the Zender, coming out of the Zender, you were clearly going through something.
Yeah. And some people thought I was having a psychotic break.
Yeah. I mean, it was no, it was not a contained experience.
Right.
Yeah, very unusual for him to give you a mantra. I don't know of any other example of that. That's quite interesting. Would you say the mantra? Would you say it?
Did I say it? Yeah. Oh, God. Yeah. Well, let me tell you. I said, well, should I repeat the whole thing? Gate, para, some gate, or just the gate. He said, oh, repeat the whole thing, but they're both the same. Meaning, so I did it. Yeah, I did it. And, I still on occasion, well, of course, it's in the Heart Sutra, but I still will call on it sometimes to support me if my thinking starts to get, the way thinking overcomes us sometimes.
So you went out into the woods, but you came back.
Oh, yeah, I came back. I didn't miss any, probably 10 minutes. I can't remember, 15 minutes. I have no idea.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then the next day, or maybe 2 days later after the session's over, the next day, he says the same thing he said to me in the dream, not to talk about it, but it's too late. It's too late. It's not that as you say, I didn't blabber about it. He said, don't talk about this. He said, and I'm paraphrasing him, he said, some people are too clever to have this kind of experience. Don't talk about it. Something like that. He uses the term clever. And that word is there. So it's interesting.
Very interesting. Yeah. Very interesting. So you had gone to him to have another Doksan. Did that happen right away, or?
Oh, I don't exactly know. Pretty soon afterwards, and then these things all mesh together. But also pretty soon afterwards, I'm in Doksan with him, and he says, "Maybe now you have attained so-called enlightenment." And he points to my shoes by the door they're coated with mud, and he said, "Now take care of these." And that's a good teaching for me. Really, it's still an important teaching for me. Still, Linda takes much better care of things than I do. So I'm still working on it.
That's great. That's great.
I mean,
so where did things lead to then?
Well, let's see.
Wait a minute. I want to go back to Tassajara. I want to tell something I remember about you. We had a meal chant in the morning where you were very intense and very serious. In the meal chant, it was long. It had, we'd chant and then they'd serve and we'd chant more and, we'd eat and then we'd chant more and they'd bring the water in the buckets. And but there's one point at which right before we open right before we start eating, where we say we should consider whether our virtue and practice deserve this. 72 laborers brought us this food. We should know where it comes from.
Yeah.
And then soon after that, we should consider whether our virtue and practice deserve this. So you considered whether your virtue and practice deserved it and decided it didn't and closed your bowls and wouldn't eat.
I remember that. That's weird. Very weird. No.
And I thought, well, let's see how long he keeps that up.
I only did it once.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, luckily wasn't, you know what that reminds me of? All the students that I've had here over the years, so many of them have a negative self-bias and are dominated by negative self-talk. And that really impedes their practice. So even though I did that, it's not something I would ever teach anybody, because so many people, at least in the Twin Cities, that come to Zen Center are dominated by putting themselves down. And so, God,
So what do you tell them?
My mantra to them, or what I say over and over again, is, genuine compassion for others has to include yourself. If you starve yourself figuratively and say you're bad, your compassion for others is going to dry up. So as much as you want to be bodhisattvas to others, you can't leave yourself out. So that's my 21st century Zen teaching for the Midwest, but I probably would be for California too. So that's why I don't tell that story, but it did happen, and was deeply. I remember how deeply I felt But you're right, I didn't keep it up. I had a good meal the next time.
So where did things lead to then?
So this is the summer of '67, and then Linda moves back up to San Francisco, and I moved between Tassajara and San Francisco in fall and winter of '68, that's '67, and then going into '68. Then in early '68, or maybe, I don't know, late '68. Let's see, my son is born. Then in '68, we leave. Linda and I leave Zen Center and move to Los Gatos, and we do it because of two things. One is that we're both pretty annoyed with Dick Baker and how he come in and taken over from our point of view, and how he dominates everything. And Linda has been his vice president. Before Yvonne ran, Linda is vice president of Zen Center, and she just has had her fill of them. And so we leave. We also leave because things are getting too Japanese for me. We didn't have Oryoki bowls from '64 to '67. We did the Heart Sutra, but we didn't do all that other stuff. And it's just getting too much for me, all the layers of robes and stuff. So we leave and move to Los Gatos, California. You know where Los Gatos is?
Los Gatos is right near Palo Alto and...
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, yeah. So we moved there, and I keep sitting every morning, and a friend of mine who was part of our sitting group in Los Altos and went to Stanford with me moves in, and he and I sit every morning, and then later he goes to Tassajara, but I never go back until I go on my book tour as a teacher many years later after Nothing Holy comes out.
Yeah.
And, I have no contact with Suzuki, basically. I don't know. It seems weird to me. It seems a little bit, I don't know. Young people do strange things. I mean, he'd been so important to me. and when Doug comes back, Doug, my friend, comes back from Tassajara, he says, well, Suzuki asked about you, and he wanted to know how many students you had. Well, I'm only in my 20s, but and he said, I tell him just me. And then we gravitate to northern Minnesota, and not having no idea there's a Zen Center here or that Katagiri will come, and I sent that letter to Suzuki, which he then replied.
Wait a minute, that letter? What letter?
Oh, I sent a letter to him from northern Minnesota, just telling him about my life and what I'm doing, and maybe saying something about expressing my emotional, my appreciation to him. And then he sends me this letter back, I don't expect him to, in which he says what he's been doing. And then he says, even if I forget your name, I will never forget you. And that's about the time I find out. Then I get a wind bell in the not too long after that, saying that he's died. I didn't even know he had cancer, and that Katagiri is moving to Minnesota. And I show this to Linda, and she says, "Oh no." And then we moved down. We moved down from northern Minnesota to Minneapolis. But first, I start commuting down. The first retreat that Katagiri has at Eric Storley's parents' house in 71 or 72 I go to, and I keep coming down for all of the retreats and finally move down.
Where were you?
Northern Minnesota. I was a social worker in far northern Minnesota on a Native American Ojibwe reservation, and then I quit that job and we homestead on the north shore of Lake Superior. And my father just keeps telling my sister that I really must have lost it. Why would I homestead in northern Minnesota? That's just totally absurd. And of course it is totally absurd, but there you go. There you go.
Huh.
And I did, we have a communal kind of deal up there, pretty communal with another couple. And this is, what is this, the early 70s. And we sit every day. I sit 2 hours a day. I've been a pretty devoted sitter my whole life. I'm not quite so devoted anymore. Actually, I turned 78, and I said to folks who were succeeding me, I said, well, I'm not going to get up early anymore and come over to Zen Center. I said, I've done that for enough years, so I'm not going there early in the morning anymore.
But that's very interesting that you went up there. I didn't realize you didn't follow Katagiri up there. Wow.
No, it was just one of those coincidences, one of those synchronicities. And I have Doksan with him at Eric Storley's parents' house, and he says, I thought I'd see you again. Then I had, okay, he thought he'd see me. Yeah, I had no idea, but he thought.
He said what?
I thought I would see you again.
Oh, that's interesting.
I mean, because that's something like 71 or 72. He hasn't seen me in 2 or 3 years. Something like that.
Wow. And then, how did that progress?
Well, then I got really involved here at the Zen Center. But, I never felt the deep connection to him I did to Suzuki. You know what it's like. My root teacher, such a profound effect on me. But I did the things I needed to do, and I became president of the board of this Zen Center. And then he ordained me and Norman Randolph as his first 2 people in 78. And then I stayed, helped build up this center. But then Robert Aiken talks about willy-nilly Zen. I think my Zen's been kind of willy-nilly off and on. So then in something like 85, I think, he's getting so conservative. He's getting older, and he's telling us we have to dress this way. A policeman has to always wears his uniform when he's on duty.
You mean Katagiri?
Yeah, Katagiri. And so then I go visit Robert Aiken in Hawaii because I'm in a quandary. And then sometime in '85, I dropped out. And it's just I don't want to be a policeman. It's not my way of teaching. I mean, not a police. You know what I mean by that analogy.
Yeah.
I want to be in the community. I want to be in the world. I want to help people with mental illness. And, that's what I do for my career, is help people with mental illness. I have a sister with schizophrenia and a brother who committed suicide. And I don't need any to dress differently. That doesn't help me in my career.
You mean Katagiri wanted you to wear robes?
Yeah. And he did, but I'm not saying that he was rigid about it, because he knew I couldn't in my mental health work. It's just that whenever we had deals at Zen Center, I was supposed to wear all those layers, and I just wasn't into it. I never had been into it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm still not into it too much, although I have ordained all these people and given all these people transmission. But even with them, I said, well, you can wear this stuff if you want, and it's good for you to learn all these ceremonies.
Yeah. But you went to Hawaii and studied with Aiken, huh?
I just went there for, Linda and I went there for, I think, 2 or 3 weeks in about 85.
Oh, I see.
And hung out with him. Yeah, and I went to a session of his, and he just counseled me. I just talked to him about my quandary, and confidentially. He was good at keeping confidentiality. And I didn't even tell Katagiri that I was doing this. It was kind of disrespectful to Katagiri, but, we do it.
Oh, yeah, definitely. You're not Japanese. Fine.
No.
It would have been uncool in Japan, but not uncool in here, or wherever, in America, wherever here is.
Yeah. And Robert Aiken says to me, he and I hit it off well. And he's a teacher, I'm the student, but still we hit it off well. And I talked to him about my situation, my dilemma. And he says, well, you could reach out to Maizumi Roshi. He said, because I think he's doing more what you're interested in, which is not chucking the priesthood, but doing some kind of amalgamation. But I'm not interested in that at all. I'm not interested in that at all because Maizumi is down at Tasahara with us. You may remember that. He comes down for a while.
Well, he was there for the first month of the first practice period. That was it.
Yeah. And at the end of the first month, he puts a hassle on me. He says, your aspiration is really deep. Your practice is really good. He said, I am going to be starting a Zen Center, and you might want to come be part of that. You could be very important. Oh, shit. My goodness. So I'm down on Maizumi. I'm down on him. So he said that, Robert Aiken says that to me, but there's no way I would consider that. Because I have that memory of Maizumi putting a hustle on me.
He already had a sitting going on. He wasn't starting it then, but it hadn't really taken off.
Yeah,
it didn't take off well until it started about that time. In fact, Maizumi told me that it was because of Suzuki that groups like his could grow. He didn't understand why, but he said he couldn't get anything going until that nobody could get anything going in America until Suzuki came and sort of lit this flame.
Yeah, which is kind of surprising, wonderfully surprising, because as you know what a Suzuki style was. It was not like Maizumi's at all. He would never put the hustle on it.
No. Wow. So that's interesting. You had that experience with Aiken, but then you went back. You did get transmission from Katagiri, right?
No, I got transmission from Karen Sunna, Sunna, who was the abbot of Zen Center before me and had been my kind of junior student friend, a psychologist also. And no, I visited Katagiri in the hospital before he died, and we had a good visit, but by then he was too weak to, it was too late. No, I didn't get transmission.
Oh, I'm surprised because he gave transmission to like 10, 12 people.
Yeah. Yeah, I know, but I wasn't around.
Oh.
Except from going to the hospital, I hadn't been around. I hadn't been there once in those, in those 2 years, zero. And I kind of thought when I visited in the hospital, he might include me, but he was already pretty sick. Yeah, so then I forgot it. I worked with a Native American teacher for a while, and did my PhD in shamanism, but I still was doing my Zen practice. And then Karen, my friend, took over at Minnesota Zen Center, and she said, "Well, why don't you come back?" So I came back and finished out with her. She made me shuso fairly soon, and finished out with her. Then one morning, she said over breakfast, "Well, I'd like to leave. I don't want to do this anymore. I'd like you to do it." And I said, "Well, I have another full-time job." And she said, "Oh, it won't matter. You can do it." So there you go.
And did you continue your full-time job?
Oh, I did for quite a few years. I don't think I did Zen Center justice, but it's done okay.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I think there's something very healthy about your attitude, I don't know. I like that approach. Maybe it was more helpful than doing it justice, as you said.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's a pretty long story.
Yeah. And there's tons more to it, I'm sure, because
and I haven't even
go on.
Oh yeah. Yeah, there was a time that in Palo Alto, I say to my Stanford friends, "Well, let's pass the Dana Bowl." We didn't have a Dana Bowl, but offering bowl, and I'll give it to Suzuki. And I give it to him afterwards, and he says, "No, this should be for you. You did all this work." And my father has paid for me at Stanford, so I refused to take it, and he ends up taking it. But I thought, my goodness, he wants to give it to me. So I have a lot to say. Yeah. But he really wants to give it to me. I mean, he's not faking it. He's not being a polite minister. He's really grateful to me for doing this.
Yeah, I think of you as the sort of hidden founder of the Los Altos Zendo, or the instigator of the whole thing.
Yeah. Well, that's true, although Suzuki is actually the instigator because it's his idea. Right.
Okay. Suzuki founded it, but you had an important role. Maybe I don't have to give it a name.
And Yeah. He's the one who says to me, "I'll come down and sleep on the couch the night before."
Right.
I look at him and I think, "Sleep on the couch," I say to myself.
Yeah, that is interesting because why did he? I mean, that's unusual. I mean, he didn't do that with Berkeley. He didn't do that with Mill Valley.
Yeah, well,
those just came about.
I have no idea.
I mean, and the most important students weren't there yet. I mean, well, Philip had come from down there. Maybe there were a few others, and he could sort of, he could sort of see the vibrations from there, or feel it, Interesting.
And then he is invited to give a talk at Stanford, which I go to. Dick takes him down, and that's a few months. Let's see. Well, that's probably a year after we start the group.
Oh,
so he gives a talk to Stanford students.
and what?
Maybe that's a year and a half after we start the group.
Do you know what was there a department that hosted him? Do you think there might be a recording of it?
I have no idea. The name of the talk is either Zen Beyond Consciousness or Zen Beyond Self-Consciousness. I'm not sure if it's Zen Beyond Self-Consciousness or Zen Beyond Consciousness. And people are impressed with him. He's not articulate, but they're impressed with his vibes.
Yeah.
He's not like, I mean, they've had Alan Watts. They want
Right.
Alan Watts
My
back.
God.
But Alan Watts thinks Sensei is good. Remember, he thinks he's good. So
Well, why do you say that?
sends
Why do
people
you
to
say
Sensei.
that?
Oh, that's just what I remember. I never heard Alan Watts say that. People told me that Alan Watts said Suzuki was the real deal.
He used,
when they come over.
I just wondered if you had any first-hand experience. Yeah, he used to send people to study with Suzuki, and he helped him out a lot right at in '59 when he first came.
Really?
Really? And they would visit some, but Alan didn't want to. He did not like anything at all regimented, like some time and going and sitting with people, or he liked ceremony.
Yeah. Well, he'd been an Anglican priest, so it's not surprising, right?
But he was very respectful, and he liked to get together with people and talk. He had his thing going on the houseboat in Sausalito, and people would come. So, how many years have you been? Oh, you say you've retired as abbot. Has that been official?
Well, yeah, but I'm still teaching. I'm no longer the guiding teacher. Let's see, that officially that changed probably 3 years ago.
To whom?
Probably one of my students, a guy named Ted O'Toole. He's been the guiding teacher for about the last.
So you don't use the word abbot.
And I don't use the word abbot. I don't use. Remember, I'm steeped in Unitarianism, and I don't use any of those words.
Well, does the group? Because
the legacy is mostly mine. Ted would probably like to use some of those, and when I die, who knows what will happen. But as long as I'm around, I don't.
Okay,
do that
all right.
stuff,
But here's what I'm thinking: what is the legal? I mean, it's the Zen Center. Is it a corporation? What sort of corporation?
It's a 501c3. That's a Minnesota nonprofit, and that's how it was incorporated back in 71 or 72 as a Minnesota nonprofit, and the board of directors is responsible for hiring the guiding teacher and monitoring the guiding teacher's performance and replacing the guiding teacher.
All right. Not like Zen Center. Which was a corporation, became a corporation sole, which where the abbot has 50% and the board has 50%.
Yeah, I didn't want to do that. I was really against that because of the then the dominance of the guiding teacher, and that's not so cool.
Yeah. Well, man, that is all really interesting to me. So, look, I want to hear more from you later. I think we've sort of come full circle today.
Yeah.
I'm really glad to talk with you. Hey, do you think Linda would talk with me?
she would, but she wouldn't have a lot to say. I'm sure she would talk.
I mean,
she won't have a lot
she
to
talk?
say. And her memory is generally good, but I think, chooses not to remember so many of these things. I wonder if she remembers the fact that we were going to get married, and she said to me, "Do you really want to get married?" Meaning that you're so into this Zen practice. Do you really want to do it? I said, "Yeah, I do."
Well,
I'm sure she'd be happy to talk with you, but I don't think it would go for more than 15 minutes.
Well, when I'm talking for a podcast, she'd have to agree to do a podcast.
Oh yeah.
All right, but you.
Oh yeah. Well, I think
I don't. When I do podcasts with people, I don't do it with a goal of hearing anything in particular. The way I see it is this is a giant oral written history of people that passed through Zen Center, had some, I call it the Cuke Archives preserving the legacy of Shunryu Suzuki and those whose paths cross his. So it could be, somebody who came through there and then became a born-again Christian and what they were doing.
Yeah. Sure. So Linda would love to do that, I think.
All right, tell her I'd like to do one with her, like maybe in May.
Okay. Do I? After I talk with her, I'll email you.
And send me her email.
After seeing what she said.
Women are in general are much less likely to want to do podcasts.
Why?
I don't know, but you could tell her it's really hard for me to get women to do podcasts. They're more private. I'm not even sure what a podcast is. You and I are talking. It's being recorded, and it's going to go on. It's going to be on the internet in my, with my podcasts.
Oh. Okay, so people, it's not transcribed. People can.
Oh, I definitely want to get them transcribed. Right? I would love to. Yeah, this is for people to listen to.
Nice. Okay. Well, I'll tell Linda. I think she'd be into it. Yeah.
And I've
ordained and given transmission to just as many women as men, but the women refuse to give Dharma talks, with a few exceptions. They refuse to be up on stage. So people think, Zen Center is so male-dominated. But if I get these women to share, some of them are much deeper than the men, but they won't do it.
Yeah,
they won't do it.
I wonder sometimes if it's because women feel, they're held to a higher standard and they feel criticized or... but it's not true of all women.
I know.
There's some that are very outgoing, but it's been a problem for me. And, I've done a couple of podcasts with women that then get cold feet afterwards and say, hey, don't use that. I said something that, one of them was they just said one thing and, well, that sounds too, I mean, I don't know. I feel like sometimes I feel there's the thing about like being worried about being criticized or being judged. I think women feel like they're being judged all the time. And, it's true. We have these urges, and I think men's urges are stronger, and look at women and think about them in terms of being mates or something like that. I think it's built into the male chemistry, but it's different in its strength with different people. And women know that. They know men are looking at them all the time. And That they're not the same. The men and women are not the same, but
that's right.
but there is crossover. But I mean, it depends. There's yeah.
Yeah.
Oh God, yes.
Okay. Well, so in what would the year be? Maybe after Tassajara, I noticed that Sensei is talking about ordaining people, and I think I see that Mel is already wearing some robes, although Suzuki didn't say anything about it. So I go to him and I say, I think I'd like to become a priest. No, actually, I don't want to become a priest. I just want to spend my life teaching and helping people sink into the deep stillness that I've been immersing myself in, and I see that a priest is the way to do that. So I go to him and I say that. He said, oh, yes, bring your wife over or bring your girlfriend over and we'll talk. And so then 3 days later, I bring Linda over, and he says to me, and during the first time, he says, yes, bring her over. He said she will be able to learn many things in Japan. She was good at oryoki. She was the first oryoki teacher, and she just had a kind of a physical grace. And but then when I come over 3 days later with her, or 4 days later with her, he says, well, I've been thinking about this, and I'm too old and you're too young. So that's the end of it. That's the end of it. That's something like 60, again, I don't know, 68, 67, 68, something like that.
Yeah, he 68, he'd only ordained, let's see, up before then, Jean sort of, she was ordained in Japan, but he considered it was for him.
Yeah.
And, there were two fellows earlier than that. He didn't really want to, but they'd gone to Japan and they got ordained. He got a colleague of his there to ordain them, and Bill McNeil and Bob Hintz. They were the head students, in 59, 60, and went to Japan, and it didn't work out well for either one of them. And then Philip and Philip Wilson, because Philip and Graham went to Japan, so he ordained them before they went to Japan to AAG. And then he ordained Claude Dallenberg in Japan when he was there in 66. And then in 68, he ordained, and then 67, Dick Baker at the opening of Tassajara. Then 68, Ron Browning and Joyce Browning, because Ron insisted on going to AAG. So he ordained them before they went there. He didn't really want to. And then I think in 69, Mel, because he was in charge of the Berkeley Zen Center. And then there was a whole slew of them in 70 and 71. So you were a little early. If you'd stuck around,
and I have this conversation with him after I've decided not to go to Japan, because here's a note from Linda. She says, would I finish my call downstairs? Yes, I'll finish my call downstairs. Let's see. I'm interested in going to Japan and practicing after Tassajara, and I talked to him about it, and he says yes, and I should go to a Heiji, and but I don't want to go.
Oh yeah, you do not.
I want to go to some. Yeah, this is in one of the books, probably in the first book, right? So, but I'm looking around for places. I don't want to go do a Heiji for obvious reasons. I want to go to Untitled, where you sit all day and you don't have to do that much ritual. And but he doesn't want me to. And then I'm still, looking around. He doesn't want me to call people, but I'm calling people and talking to them and trying to make a decision. And then that breakfast, which is in my book, when I'm having in his little room there, kind of a breakfast, and he points to the Raku pottery on the shelf and says, if you try to find the best one, you will never appreciate any of them. And then I afterwards I say, oh, screw it, I won't even go. I'll stay here with him. So, so then after that, I talked about becoming a priest. So that's the sequence.
So you're having breakfast with him where?
It's a koji, and it might be it's just tea. I don't remember. He has that. I can't remember. There's the Zendo, and then there's a little room which is kind of a kitchen-like enclave. Huh? Was it? Oh yeah. So we're in the kitchen.
Yeah, it was a kitchen. It's a kitchen. It's the Sokoji kitchen. It's a big table, big wooden table there.
Yeah, that's right. So we're there, and so that's when he says that to me. Kind of annoyed, but then later I consider it a great teaching. I think it was a great teaching, actually. No. But I didn't. But I'm glad I didn't go to a H.
No, that wouldn't have worked. Good Lord. Worked for Phil, and it worked for Gene.
My stories about that part of my life go on forever because those were pivotal. My relationship with him, and so many people feel this way, David. I'm sure you do. They were pivotal in who I became as a human being and what I'm doing now, 60 years later. Pivotal.
Yeah, indeed. That's right.
Yeah, and that's why what you've done is preserve all that stuff, and that book, Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind. I just read something online. Someone like Shambhala asked like 8-10 Buddhist teachers in the U.S., American Buddhist teachers, to pick the best book or the root book, and more of them picked Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind. And these weren't just Zen people, than any of them. And that's just, wow, that blew me away. But, you've really kept this legacy alive, and that's wonderful. And I heard him give those talks in Los Altos in Mind, Beginner's Mind talks. So full circle, right? Although I'm not quite dead yet, so maybe the circle's not totally full, and you're not either. You're a few years younger than me.
Did you say you're 79?
I will be 79 on May 1st.
Yeah, so I'm 77, and I was 77 in February.
Oh, yeah. Well, I remember you were younger at Tassajara, but, we were all so young. I don't know why I thought you were younger.
So you were like 24, and I was 22.
Yeah. And then there were the old guys, like Dick Baker and Mel. Mel was
they were in their 30s. Mel,
right.
Mel, a little older. Mel maybe was like 35 or something. It's hard to say. The old people were, and then there was like Claude Dallenberg, who was like in his 40s, and and Stan.
I remember Stan too. Yeah, I remember Stan. Yeah. He was a regular back then.
Oh yeah.
Yep. I don't know if he ever went to Tassajara.
Oh, he spent a lot of time in Tassajara. He spent years at Tassajara. Yeah.
Oh, did he?
Yeah.
I remember.
Yeah. Yeah, he did. He did well at Tassajara. He'd run the office, and he was good with guests. Running the office in the summer. He and I both worked with guests. That was our specialty.
Oh, wow.
Sam was so matter of fact, and and he really liked to chew the fat. Yeah. Okay. Well, look. Hey, why don't you get a little notebook, carry it with you, and every time you think of a story that you haven't told, write it down, and let's talk again when you got a list.
Okay, yeah. Well, I would say they're probably, just in listening to myself, they're probably 8 or 10 that I haven't told. No, he had a huge, and I was lucky, as you were to a degree, that I was there. I got to be kind of, the first time I went to Zen Center, I just knocked on the door and he came and answered, and that was like that ever since. Then Tazahara, all these interlopers started coming.
Right. There were students from way back in the early days that really missed the intimacy of the early days, and didn't feel so comfortable when it got bigger, and it was sort of Richard Baker was the dividing line there, but that's what it needed. It had to have it,
Well, that's true. It's true. I completely get that now. I completely get that.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you though, still stylistically, San Francisco Zen Center and Green Gulch is just not my teaching style. I'm too Unitarian.
Well, that's good. That's good.
Well, just how I am.
Yeah. Well, good for you. Good for you. Well, you could make a list. I could go through your books and make a list of stuff for you to tell again. But just let's keep in touch, and maybe in a year we can do something else, or maybe in a month if you say, "Hey, I've got a whole bunch of stuff here I can tell you."
Sure.
Just stay in touch and let me know.
Sure. Sure. I'm relatively healthy. Are you relatively healthy?
Yeah, I don't take any medicine.
Good. Are you?
I don't take the aspirin. That's not necessarily recommended anymore anyway. But if you live in a place where there's dengue, I really don't think it's a good idea to take a baby aspirin.
Yeah. Oh, I see. And your wife? You have a wife from the U.S.?
Yeah, we've been together 18 years. My fourth wife, and I'm her fourth husband.
She's your first
fourth.
Wife.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Oh, you're fourth.
And I'm her fourth husband.
Okay. Oh, 4 in both sides.
Right. And our mates keep dying mysteriously. No, I'm getting that. I just think that would be a great story. I mean, I think about doing that. But hey, let's call it a day. Talk to Linda and tell her hi from me. And I've really enjoyed talking with you. And
I enjoyed talking with you. Okay. Now this podcast, I'm not very 21st century, so
I'll tell you what to do. I'll send you a link. I'll send you an email that explains it.
Okay. Well, I'm not necessarily going to listen to the whole thing because I've heard myself talk enough, but I'd probably like to tell a few people.
Oh yeah, sure. No, I understand. I don't listen to anything. I just work. I pretty much don't read or listen to anything except all the stuff I'm dealing with all day. I have just from what comes my way, I've got at least an hour and a half of reading every day. Usually a few hours. Yeah, that's all I do is read and listen to things. And then people tell me, you ought to read this and listen to that. And, I want to walk down to the beach and go swimming.
Oh, yeah. You guys live near the water. Huh?
Yeah. I'd say 15 minutes walking.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I hope you have a good day. It's the end of my day and the beginning
Right,
of yours,
right.
so I hope it's
Yeah,
good
well, it's
for
been
you.
great. Really enjoyed talking.
I enjoyed talking to you.
Okay, take care.
Good night.
All right. Bye-bye. So thanks a lot, Tim Burkett. That was really good, really interesting. And yeah, you write down more memories and stories. And I should talk to Wanda Isles, who puts together his books for him. I mean, he sort of dictates and gives her stuff he's written, and he goes over it with her. But when I went over Nothing Holy About It, I was dealing with Wanda. And so I'll bet she could give us a nice list. Okay. This has been a Cuke Audio podcast. I'm DC, Poobah of Cuke Audio and Cuke Archives, coming to you from sleepy Sanur with Dogette Bandita, Feline Cuchita, and dear lovely Katrinka, who just called me to dinner. And we're wishing you and yours and all of us a grand awakening.